Right. So, as far as solution architecture itself is concerned, especially when we are working on Java solution architecture, we should be knowing about what are the different stages will be there in solution architecture part. So this is what generally the solution life cycle is all about. Means whenever if you want to develop any kind of solution for the project, whatever we are identified by us, it's always important for us to understand what are the different tasks we have on. Normally, these tasks will be categorized into three different parts. One is about the pre-deployment phase. Second one is called deployment phase, followed by post-deployment. So these are the three major elements wherein being into solution architecture, when we try to understand about the phases of solution is what something which normally comes here. Now, the first one about pre-deployment, because when there is any kind of application we develop in context to the solution, being a solution architect, when we try to develop any kind of solution, we have given the solution. So once the solution was given, once the solution is developed, there is a deployment phase which normally we perform. So before we are getting into the deployment, there will be a deployment phase which is called pre-deployment. In this pre-deployment, the major element is all about the business requirements followed by the constraints. This is the first one which normally we taken into consideration. Means whatever the different business analysis phases do we have, whatever the business analysis requirements do we have, all everything will be taken into consideration over here. This is point number one. So in this business analysis requirements followed by the constraints, whatever we have taken, business analysts are the team who will be gathering the business requirements, trying to understand about the kind of objective, goal, mission, business need, business situation, what kind of scope, everything comes under the business requirements followed by the constraints and all everything whenever we are working on the pre-deployment phase. Next one, this business requirements, whatever the requirements and all, will be translated into technical requirements. Because end of the day, what is that are we going to develop is nothing but the application, right? So we are developing a technical solution over here. Whenever we try to develop a technical solution, it is always important and it is always required for us to understand about what are the different technical requirements we have. Now, when we try to understand about the technical requirements, the very first thing what is that we should understand about use case analysis. Means use case analysis majorly focusing on the functional elements. For example, there is a functionality wherein we have taken. First of all, we should understand who are the primary actor. Primary actor, nothing but the person who is going to perform that particular functionality. So wherein there will be two different phases. One is precondition, second is a post-condition. Precondition means to perform that particular functionality, what is the precondition to be followed? Followed by the what must be the post-condition has to be followed. In between, whatever the scenario we normally develop is called success scenario. Followed by this, there are some assumptions and exceptions will also be taken place. That is the next level. So this is all something which comes under the use case analysis. So for that use case documents is what something which normally prepared by usually by the technical team in context to the BA team and all technical team will be gathering all that. This is where generally use case analysis and all everything comes into picture. Next, usage analysis. Usage analysis basically from the user perspective. So normally users will be classified into two parts. One is internal users, second is external users. Internal users, nothing but the users who are developing an application internally. When it comes to the external users and all that, so whoever is going to develop the solution from an external point of view, those people are called as external users. So understanding use case analysis, wherein understanding about different scenarios what we have, followed by external stakeholders as well as internal stakeholders will be taken into consideration over here. Next, quality of service requirements means whenever there are any requirements that are taken into consideration, it's always important for us to understand about the kind of quality services, what is that are we going to perform over here. So these are the two major elements when it comes to the pre-deployment comes in the beginning. Normally, these will be taken care of by the business analyst team. At the same time, there will be a role called systems analyst now and then we have. They will be taken care of these two things. This is where generally this designs comes into picture. This is what generally systems analysis design from the logical point of view. Being a solution architect, one should understand. This is what something which normally we do, because requirements and all everything is not something we do it. But what we do, we gather the non-functional requirements, because whatever the non-functional requirements we have, because performance, scalability, load balancing, fault tolerancing, availability, reachability, accessibility, all these things are comes under non-functional requirements. So non-functional requirements, whatever we have taken and all, everything will be something useful for us whenever we want to develop any kind of logic. So why? Because if you want to develop any kind of logic, first of all, we need to understand the high level design. At the same time, we must be knowing about the low level designs also. When you talk about high level designs give you a high level glimpse over the application or the design what we are going to develop. When it comes to the low level design itself is concerned, what are the different programs are we going to write? Which programming language we are writing? How many programs are we going to write over here? So what is the algorithm are we going to use? What are the different design patterns we are using? All these things are comes under the low level design. For that, the base requirement is non-functional requirements. Performance, everything will be taken into consideration. So by taking that, being a solution architect, what we have to do, we need to develop the solution design. Prior to that, we need to understand the logical design, logical architecture, and as well as develop deployment scenario is what something which we have to be developed here. Do remember, deployment is not something done by the solution architect. There will be a deployment team as separate. But for the context of the logical architecture itself is concerned, means if you want to develop any kind of business logic for a particular functionality, there must be some logical architecture which has to be designed. Generally, this will be designed by the solution architect team and all, right? So those people will do that. At the same time, whatever the system analysis designing, right? So all these things will be done by them. This is where generally this logical architectures and all everything comes into picture. Followed by this, whatever the different deployment scenarios which are to be deployed over here, all these things are comes under the pre-deployment. This is what something which we done in the first phase. This is the first phase. Now, when it comes to the second phase, in this second phase, second one is about deployment phase. When it comes to the, so when it comes to the deployment phase, there will be two different things. One is about the deployment design. Second is about deployment implementation. So deployment design majorly focusing on the deployment architecture, because what are the different path settings we want to do? What are the deployment steps and procedures which are to be taken into consideration? All these things has to be visualized in a form of deployment architecture is what something comes under the deployment design part. Next, implement specification means, for example, if you want to implement a particular solution and all, what is the specification you want to have? Either it can be hardware, it can be software, it can be integrating with the old legacy systems or the new cloud applications. Everything comes under the implementation specifications, etc. All that. Next, we need to develop the implementation plan. This is where generally planning of implementation come into picture. Means if you want to implement any kind of project, it's always important for us to understand about what are the implementation procedures do we require to follow, and how this to be taken into consideration is what something we have to do. Under the deployment implementation is what something we do over the deployment phase. The third one about the post-deployment. Post-deployment means once the deployment is done, so we have to make sure the operations, means if you have to take care of the maintenance of the application, followed by performance tuning and etc. At the same time, monitoring the application performance, accessibility, etc. All that. At the same time, if there is any kind of enhancements and upgradations to be taken care of, everything comes deployment part. This is all something comes under the operational level. So when we are going to understand from the solution architecture perspective, as I stated earlier and repeating the same, deployment is not something done by the architects. But when it comes to the logical architecture as well as deployment architecture and all, this is what something which being a solution architect or architect teams, one should understand when we are developing the solution over here. So these are the different steps normally will be taken. One is about the pre-deployment. I am talking about the deployment perspective for the solution, whatever were identified so far. One is pre-deployment phase. Second is called deployment phase. Third is about post-deployment phase. So these are the different tasks which normally we do when we are going to provide any kind of solution from the context of the deployment tasks are all about. Right. So this is all about this session. If you have any questions, please go ahead.